Yo. So a lot of y'all chimed in and wanted me to make some comments on the dating scene, on the crisis of masculinity in the modern West, and three or four basically, three or four shit like what's happening in terms of gender relations in the West. It's so fucked up. You know, testosterone levels are dropping fast, losing altitude like an airplane, a crashing airplane. And why is that? All right, sedentary lifestyle, lack of physical confrontation, i.e., feminization of society, and toxins in the diet and water. Oh, and media, entertainment and media, socializing a low T mindset. But that is connected to the general feminization of society and the complete centralization of all conflict that has stakes involved. Right, you look at the ideal for a Western society. They want low stakes verbal conflict to be able to solve every dispute, which means that there is a massive demand for conformity, and that conformity has to fit into the narrative of everything can be solved with low stakes verbal disputes. And who is it that solves everything with low stakes verbal disputes? Women! And so men must feminize themselves in order to fit in to established society, such as in an office or in any service industry. And this is what is causing this sexual drift that people are referring to, because you got giga chads who can cope with it by being a sort of androgynous but still handsome person. But then you got these other people who are stuck in their boxes of boy and girl, and they get trapped in the ideation thing. So they either become eunuchs, cucks and betas, traps, or kind of like misunderstood masculinists. Gays, angry gays, and stuff like that. Incels is another one. Redacteds, like in that one copy pasta conspiracy about turning all the faggots that whine on the internet into traps, which was part of a larger leftist strategy, which exists out in society, by the way. I've witnessed it firsthand. It's quite clever. It's quite infatuating, and it's like it speaks to the same infatuation with which white women talk about white men. They see that men of other races pretty much think very similar to white men in the majority, and then they want to create this fairy tale of escaping from the farm, escaping from the cold embrace of the past on a southern wind, in order to pretend that it's something else, something new, sex plus. And you see, at the top of the oppression thing, on the conceptual spear tip of oppression theory, there is nothing but princess scenarios of you, the unique individual, coming home amongst your people. Like in some of those ecstatic musical theater things from the 70s in the US, which have now become a completely gross farce. You can see how this dominates the aesthetic of US mass entertainment phenomenon, with loads of Disney princess medley type of shit being what serious people choose to consume as a reality framework altering entertainment, which they either do out of stupidity or perversity. It's one of those two. So speaking upon three of foes and the influence of feminism on society, the influence of feminism on society, feminism is married to Marxism, right? It's the idea of the critique of everything because the status quo is patriarchal, and so the thing outside of the status quo, the thing beyond yourself, that is to say, verrückt, that cannot be described, but it must be constantly worked towards. So it's a type of eternal becoming, which is why so many of these red feminists or conservative feminists become kind of like Nietzschean yuppies. You know, they try to push the Nietzschean yuppie ideal, which is what they're referring to on the podcast when they're talking about career women. You know, what is the Nietzschean yuppie? A hustler, a cutthroat. Smack the knife. And you know, this is what has made these women get a sort of like, oh, she's a man-eater, she's a femme fatale kind of image on them, which is hugely rooted in the current culture, right? And it's all about boosting the consumer economy, but not with the aim of it sustaining anything in the future. It's all about just getting as much out as you can before you die. Because absolutely everyone participating in the system realize that democracy has no course. It is just like Plato said, it's a drunken pleasure cruise where we take turns on cranking the big wheel on the deck to see what happens. You know, like some acid freak just walking onto a bus and grabbing onto the steering wheel and just being like, let's see what happens if we do this. Or much like what I'm doing right now. But for some reason this dismays you. Even though it's exactly the same thing as the current model of society. So yeah. So you know, fucking with 304s, and like white 304s are the worst 304s, you know, to be honest with you. Like I met some white 304s that they was craving the dick. They wanted to like get dick down by like, you know, was obviously a natty, you know, OG nigga. But they couldn't allow themselves to do it because there weren't any lines out in their programming. You know, there weren't any dialogue options in the game that they were playing that would allow them to get into that situation. So they would just walk around and sort of like spaz. You know, kind of like when you play video games and you see units trying to walk outside of the rendered graphics and into like the landscape that's painted as a background. If we're talking like old school PlayStation 2 games, you know, just running on the spot, you know, glitching ass NPCs, and you know, just acting goofy, you know, like Flocka was talking about. And you know, I I assumed he was gonna get out of there early because that must kind of feel like a boiler. That must kind of feel like a boiler. You know what I'm saying? Shout outs to Waka Flocka for being on the podcast. Spitting some, you know, spitting some of that nigga shit. But yeah, finally the guys are like turning it around, like they're taking victories now. Which, you know, I'm kind of ready for that. I'm kind of ready for the lads to win. Because I'm realizing that, you know, the guys, they gotta win, you know. This whole system thing that chicks are complaining about, the patriarchy, it's their desires that create that. You know, it's their desires that create that. You know, why would a man go away for 3 days to log the raw material for your cabin so you can raise the kid indoors. If he thought that as soon as he left, you were gonna be fucking the neighbor guy, or the whole neighborhood for that matter. Why would he do that? You know, and if there's a part of you, and you know that's like at the start of the Marquis de Sade's 120 Days of Sodom. He's like, you may think what you want of these stories, but one of them is gonna give you a fucking turn on. And it's like, I know that there's women out there who get a twitch in their pussy thinking about their beloved nice husband dying while they're getting more or less raped by some böse uncle. So, you know, if men want to be murderously Abrahamic and be like, you better fucking fall in line with the message or we're gonna cull you out of this society. If your recourse is then, oh, we're gonna blow up society then realize that just like that goth chick said, when she dies the world ends. So if you're trying to bring about the end of the world, because you can't really change the external world really at all, only the internal world, what inevitably ends up happening is that you just end up killing yourself, which is what this whole ideology of feminism is. Especially when it's rooted in Marxism or sacrilege, as is the conservative sort of angle, or Jewry, as is my kind of angle, because that's, you know, the Talmud is like the foundational spring of the sacral sciences that Zizek refers to. And that is, of course, the realm of eternal becoming, which is why Zizek looks like, you know, the perennial dwarf, you know, at the bottom of the wheel of Shiva. The constantly grasping impulse of the cockroach, of the base earth, of the ground. And you know, like I've said before, the history of ontological philosophy has always been an incessant search for grounding of concepts. And so in order to ground every concept, you get the constant fucking verbal mill of Marxism, which is just eternal critique, right? In order to siphon substance out of the thing, so it becomes malleable to somebody's will. It is about building society in nature, you know. If you played Minecraft and you decided to build a homestead in a forest, you can see clearly how you take material out of nature and rearrange it to your will, and it becomes like a scar on the crust of the earth. And that is what that thought seeks to achieve, whether it be a sort of contractual, steely coldness of the Muslim-inspired, you know, host of the podcast, or if it's the yuppie journalist mentality of those career women. It's just the same shit. It's just the will to power. The will to power. And you know, rape, you know, the funny thing about these feminists is that they want to be like down with the people and down with the clown and shit. 1 second, you know, they want to be there trying to like, oh, Waka Flocka is so deep. But then they're there about like, well, how are we going to make investigative systems that will make it, that will ensure the woman's comfort in every sexual interaction? You know, like a Catherine Hepburn at the Grand Royal Hotel, feeling quite concerned about the common woman after a couple of glasses of champagne. So it really just comes back to that, you know. It really just comes back to that. And who started the sexualization of the other? Nature. Nature. Y'all want to try and finesse some guys, but y'all don't even make 6 figures. Come the fuck on. Laws about that shit are just meant to preserve a culture of a certain type of civility. But if we can't even maintain that, then what the fuck's the point, you know? That's probably what a lot of poor people would answer these people on the podcast. If they may speak freely, which they so often cannot. And increasingly less and less, because of course people's jobs now depend on them having the right opinions and not just some qualifications and showing up on time. That type of rudimentary shit. And so yeah, building a better future, reaching ourselves beyond ourselves, but to what? That every girl is like a fucking, parakeet in a gilded cage, rubbing herself in 4K quality, and getting enough to like eat and smoke weed from that. And then all the guys are food delivery drivers, basically. I don't know, that could work. That could work. But what about physical sex though? You know, that's what I'm saying, like, let those kids alone, you know, Demolition Man. I'm sure we've watched it on the channel. Look at this. I'm such an incessant roller. It's become almost like a deep poop color. Looks like I got poo on my fingers. When I'm eating that shitty pussy. Because I'm just that much of a gentleman. And that makes you slightly turn on the thought of me dying. The Apollonian versus the Dionysian. Sabertooth versus Pinky. 2 types of cruelty, right? And as you reach the ontological bottom of that whole discussion in this last episode. And that's what it comes down to. And as such, that will probably explain to a lot of people the dichotomy between Aryan and un-Aryan, in the sense of viewing the Jewish approach to mysticism as a inherently transsexual impulse. By representing the realm of the becoming, they represent the lunar realm, which is the feminine realm, which is the realm of the inside, which is the realm of the womb. And, by being in the realm of the sun, you're in the realm of the ejaculation. Direct action, outside. Rade. Joy. The joy of cruelty. The polar opposite societies of the Dionysian and Apollonian would both be very cruel in different ways. The Dionysian would be represented by a type of cruelty that seems pointless to the outside observer. It would seem pointless and willy-nilly, and almost an offense. Whilst the cruelty of an Apollonian civilization would seem far too harsh. And the contrast here is like sulfur and mercury, essentially. Like sulfur and mercury, which are both able to have corrosive effects. Which is why there's a dry path and a wet path. Which means that hoes aren't necessarily on top. So again, back to the whole like, are you gonna be red on the top of the tree? It's like, first of all, you gonna be red on top of the tree, you're gonna get eaten by a bird. And second of all, that means you're gonna have to like compete with a bunch of guys that aren't hosts but still have a lot of skills. And you're gonna recognize it's not enough just tuning and taking loads and making moonwater or whatever it is you read on the internet. Of course, there's no point in treating this as a contest, because it's like, what is it that people want? Good dreams? Always forget your dreams, guys. You don't want to be caught up in that in real life. You know how hard it is to get out of a dream once it's turned bad on you? That might cost you your life, which is exactly what they intend to achieve. That is how time moves forward. Right? There's no element that is wholly Dionysian or wholly Apollonian. You know, combat, for instance. What is it, Dionysian or Apollonian? You look at a combat movie, there are moments of glory where you feel keen. There are moments of pure awe. There are moments of moving tragedy, perhaps, or something that is beyond mere vocabulary description. And Nietzsche's insight is that when you zoom out on the panoramic view of all life, you get the tragedy, which is the constant friction between Apollonian and Dionysian. But there are many other dyads to infer from this. We spoke of sulfuric and mercurial, sun and moon, but also being and becoming. Which is why, Nietzsche's last book is about how to become what I already am, creating a sort of paradoxical statement, trying to unify the two concepts, which is exactly what all such unifications necessarily become, paradoxical. Which is why the only thing you can change within yourself to master the world is precisely how you deal with paradoxes. And the essence of double Mercury is to be able to believe in them and not believe in them at the same time, which is essentially levitating. So it takes forever. And it's all about what heart rate you have while you're in the discussion, how you're going to be able to move with it. But one thing's for damn sure, that podcast is set up just to produce vocabulary. There is no winner. Obviously, everybody becomes miserable at like 30. That's why people used to just go out and fight wars and die like that. It's only the last 50 years or something we've allowed ourselves to believe in this shit. And that's been here in the West. And like I said in previous videos, once all the white boys have been turned into trannies, the podcasters will be next up, because the machine has an infinite appetite. And of course the white bitches are going to be put in a meat grinder and sold in the kebab store, which I shall eat gleefully. Well, speaking of the greatness of our multicultural society. So if you don't want to be a part of this, just stay hard, fuck some hoes, read some magic books, do some drugs, get into a couple of fights, and don't let any of these Saint Mary impersonators tell you what to do. Because if you're on the path, you'll be at the right place at the right time when you need to be. No speaking on nothing at all. Speaking on nothing at all. So yeah, 3 of foes. Make a petition campaign or something before your money becomes worthless in hyperinflation. Because all of y'all didn't bother to fucking make the handmade knitting shop. You just took out the fucking... You just siphoned the value and sold it off. after a few months. And so that leads us back to the 80s. What would I have done? Probably not the same thing that you guys did. Because I don't have that much faith in whatever it was that you were tripping on when you were on speed but done fucking. Maybe it was just intense guilt. And you've been running from that ever since. Oh well. Death catches up to us all. Right. Well, if you enjoyed this video, consider supporting me on Patreon. And hit the like button downstairs in my pants, in the doobly-doo, so you get the notifications. You know when I make another video. You know when I'm on it. You know when I'm fucking around. You know when I'm fucking hitting it. When I'm not hitting it. When I'm wearing a mask. When I'm not wearing a mask. Etc, etc. Or are we always wearing a mask? Is it onion or is it diamond? Is it a diamond onion? How low can you go? As low as that lowest turtle. Because he's all the way down. You know what I'm saying? Franklin. You know what I'm talking about? I'm a growing boy. You know, sometimes I get an erection while these 3 or 4 speak. And that's all there is to say about that podcast. Alright. Peace out, niggas. Hope you enjoyed the episode.